The clouds hung low that morning, a thick gray blanket obscuring the sun, as though the sky whispered secrets of the tumult to come. A chill swept through the air, cutting to the bone, sending shivers across the vast expanse of wheat fields that wavered like flames in the wind. The world felt poised, like the moment before a storm clashed with the sea. And in that quiet stillness, a shadow lurked, the shadow of a band of outlaws, eyes set on mischief, hearts pounding with the thrill of the chase. But this wasn't an ordinary farm, not by any means. It belonged to Old Man Carver. He was more than a farmer. He was a legend in these parts, tales of his grit recounted in hushed tones over crackling fires. They spoke of days when he single-handedly defended his land against rustlers and thieves, his weathered hands deftly wielding the tools of both trade and survival. When danger drew close, most would scatter like leaves in a storm, but not Old Man Carver. He'd stand firm like the ancient oaks that surrounded his homestead, roots dug deep into the earth, refusing to yield. That morning began as any other. The familiar creak of the barn doors echoed in the stillness, breaking the dawn silence. The rusty hinge stood as a sentinel, watching as farmers' daily tasks unfolded. Carver stepped out, his silhouette stark against the encroaching light. With calloused hands, he gripped his pitchfork, a tool familiar yet imbued with the promise of protection. But the horizon shifted. A dark speck grew larger, morphing into a band of figures riding hard. 4 men, faces masked, urgency in their movements. They were the notorious Grimm brothers. Rumor had spread across the valley like wildfire tales of their ruthless raids, of farms stripped bare and families left trembling. A wave of unease rippled through Carver's heart, but he stood resolute, every muscle in his body attuned to the encroaching storm. The Grimm brothers charged toward his property with reckless abandon, their horses pounding the earth, hooves like thunder in the otherwise peaceful morning. Old Man Carver knew this was no ordinary confrontation. This was a play for dominance, a declaration. They sought to instill fear and claim what was not theirs. Yet, a fire ignited within him, fueled by defiance and decades of labor. He felt the weight of his ancestors behind him, urging him to stand tall to protect what was rightfully his. "Not on my land," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else, a mantra that echoed in the still air of dawn. Each word infused him with adrenaline that coursed through his veins, heavy and electric. As the outlaws approached, fists clenching and eyes narrowed, Carver shifted his grip on the pitchfork. It was just a tool for the harvest, but right then and there, with the sunlight barely breaking through the oppressive clouds, it became a spear, a symbol of defiance. The Grimm brothers scowled, identical smirks stretching across their faces. They saw an old man, tired and weathered, standing against them like a frail tree waiting to be uprooted. Little did they know he was a bedrock, his spirit a storm much fiercer than theirs. "Go home, old man," snarled the leader, a tall figure with a scar running jagged across his cheek. "This doesn't concern you." Something primal flickered in Carver's gaze, a determination that didn't just come from him but from years of defending his home and heart. His voice roared like thunder, fierce and steady, awakening an age-old courage that seemed to rise from the very soil beneath his feet. The outlaws reeled for a moment, surprise flashing across their faces. They had expected fear, perhaps a plea for mercy. Instead, they found a mountain of resolve standing before them, a man made of grit and unyielding spirit. They wheeled their horses, eyes wide now measuring the odds, but just as setback loomed on their horizon, arrogance seized them again. And like a cloud bursting, their bravado unleashed a torrent of chaos. They spurred their horses forward, charging at him with wild fury. But Old Man Carver didn't flinch. He planted his feet, rooted in ground that had borne witness to every triumph and trial he had ever faced. At the last moment, he swung the pitchfork, its tines glinting menacingly in the dim light, and thrust it forward like a knight wielding a sword. The lead horse reared up, shrieking in fright, and the outlaw toppled off with a thundering crash. The earth shook beneath him, and a gasp escaped the remaining outlaws. They hadn't counted on this, yet bravado fueled their recklessness. They circled back, determined to wear down his spirit, desperate to break him. They spread out, flanking him, taunts spilling like venom into the air. But Carver stood unmoved as the world around him creaked with anticipation. Time slowed, stretched into a taut silken thread, each second heavy with humanity's oldest struggle, the fight between fear and courage. He felt the weight of every dream he had woven on this farm, every life he had nurtured, infused with the essence of love, sweat, and soil. It all flowed through him now, coursing through his veins like wildfire. Then, without warning, the eldest of the brothers lunged forward, hand reaching for his holster. The crack of a gunshot rang out, a sound so sharp it sliced through the air. But Carver was ready. He spun, pitchfork raising like a shield as it reflected the sunlight, blinding him momentarily, yet fueling his determination. He dove to the side as the bullet whizzed past him, a close call that would have extinguished lives. But Old Man Carver had no intention of giving in. With a grunt, he spun back around, seeing the outlaw reconsidering his aim. He struck forward, the pitchfork finding its way to the outlaw's arm, forcing him off balance. A scream pierced the air like a knife, the sound of desperation mingling with disbelief. The brothers hesitated, their bravado faltering. Fear rippled through their ranks, and that loss of confidence was tangible. Carver stood tall, eyes blazing with fierce energy. "Leave now and you walk away." It was then that the outlaws, once a force of terror, fluctuated as shadows do. They glanced at one another, uncertainty now weaving through their ranks, clutching at their wit. They had come seeking glory, but they found a man unyielding, fiercer than any storm they'd ever faced. One of the horses snorted nervously, feeling the tension wrapped round them like barbed wire. The henchmen exchanged frantic glances, murmurs breaking like brittle glass, until the leader gripped the reins, snarling as he directed them back a pace. "This ain't over, old man," he spat, rage emanating from him like smoke rising from a dying fire. And then they retreated. The grim brothers rode off in a flurry of dust and disgraced pride, disappearing into the bleak morning, leaving Carver standing amidst the remnants of the fight, untouched and unwavering. The wind began to sift through the fields, whispering past him, a soothing balm after the chaos, but he knew this peace was fragile. A part of him remained in the fight, vigilant, as adrenaline coursed through his body. "Not on my land," he repeated, this time a soft affirmation, resonating through the air like a promise. The land he had cultivated through blood, sweat, and tears would remain his. And as the dawn finally broke through, casting ripples of gold across the horizon, Old Man Carver turned back to his fields. He knew, deep in his bones, that the battle had been won, but the war was far from over. He walked slowly, a quiet determination in every step, a guardian of his home, a warrior at heart. The sun had not yet risen when the world lay wrapped in shadows. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint rustle of leaves. Deep within the heart of that stillness, 4 riders crested the hill, dark silhouettes against the horizon. They moved with purpose, their eyes glinting with mischief, their spirits high. The grim brothers were known across the land, infamous for their ruthless raids, and that morning they had no intention of just passing through. Down in the valley below, a lone farmhouse stood, its worn wooden facade robust against the encroaching darkness. This was Old Man Carver's land, his haven, his pride. The crops he had nurtured through years of toil reached toward the sky, a testament to his hard work and indomitable spirit. But as the outlaws approached, their laughter cut through the quiet like a jagged knife, and a cold realization gripped his heart. They were coming for him. Carver sat on his porch, eyes narrowed as he watched the shadows draw nearer. His weathered hands rested on his knees, calloused and strong from years of labor. In that moment, a tension began to build in his chest, both fear and fire mingling together. Memories flooded him, flashes of past skirmishes, fights long fought and won, each a reminder of what he stood to protect. As the first light of dawn whispered across the sky, the brothers rode closer, their horses snorting and stamping in anticipation. They were men who relished fear, and they seemed to thrive on creating it. But Carver, despite his age and frailty, straightened his back, letting the weight of the moment settle in his bones. This wasn't just a farm, it was his life, his legacy. The leader of the outlaws, a tall man with a scar slicing through his cheek, raised a fist and shouted, "Old man, get off that porch and surrender." The words hung in the air, thick and charged, as if time itself held its breath. Carver's heart thundered in his chest, but he didn't flinch. A deep-rooted resolve surged through him. He thundered back, his voice firm, resonating like the toll of a great bell. Laughter erupted from the outlaws, each sound a taunt, a challenge. They thought him foolish, an old man playing at bravery. Carver gripped the old pitchfork resting against the railing, the wood warm from the sun that still had not fully risen. It was a mere tool for work, but in his hands it became a weapon, a declaration of defiance. He stepped off the porch, his feet crunching against the gravel path leading to the yard. Each step felt like a stake driven into the ground, a declaration of his resolve. "Come and take it if you dare," he challenged, planting his feet wide. A gust of wind whipped through his gray hair, as if nature itself was rallying behind him. The brothers exchanged glances, surprised by the fire in his heart. How could an old man stand against four hardened criminals? Time seemed to accelerate as the leader charged forward, drawing his revolver, aiming it straight at Carver's heart. A heartbeat later, he pulled the trigger. For a brief moment, everything froze, the world suspended in time. But Carver was ready. He darted to the side, his instincts honed by years of defending his land. The bullet punched into the earth where he stood just a fraction of a second before, sending dirt flying. Carver swung the pitchfork with the fierce resolve of a man with everything to lose. The sharp tines found their mark against the outlaw's horse, sending the beast reeling and the rider crashing hard into the ground. A gasp escaped the brothers, the shock of their leader's fall awakening uncertainty among them. In that heartbeat of doubt, Carver felt the surge of adrenaline flow through him. He was not just a farmer, he was a guardian, a beast awoken from slumber. Before the remaining outlaws could regroup, he lunged forward, swift and decisive. He swung his pitchfork again, the metal glinting as it arced through the air. It met the next rider's arm, knocking the gun from his grasp. A cry of pain echoed through the valley, pushing back against the silence that had dominated the morning. The grim brothers were losing their arrogance, their confidence unraveling like the threads of a frayed rope. One of them turned to flee, giving way to instinct, fear flooding his veins. The others looked on, uncertain, caught between their desire for conquest and the alarming reality that old man Carver was standing his ground. Shouted the leader, still on the ground, anger masking the fear creeping beneath his bravado. The remaining outlaws hesitated, eyes darting between their fallen brother and the old farmer standing unabashed before them. "No one's taking anything from me," Carver shouted, voice booming through the tension. They surged forward again, but doubt lingered on their faces. A shift had occurred in the very fabric of the moment. Carver was not merely defending his crops. He was battling for something deeper, something that stilled the air and ignited a fire inside him. As the leader staggered to rise, Carver watched, calculated, waiting for the right moment. The band of brothers lunged towards him, chaos blurring their movements, but he stood fixed, resolute, each pulse of his heart echoing through him like a drumbeat. With a swift twist, Carver thrust the pitchfork towards the ground, using its point as leverage to launch himself into the fray. The next outlaw barreled into him, but Carver sidestepped with surprising agility, using the weight of his body to knock him down. The shock on the outlaw's face mirrored Carver's own strength. Years spent toiling on the farm had forged a man who still had fight left in him. The air crackled with tension and adrenaline, each movement a dance of survival. The grim brothers, for all their cruelty, were just men driven by fear and the thrill of power. But in their eyes flickered the stark realization that they had bitten off more than they could chew. Carver's resistance wasn't merely about land. It was about the truth that transcended all fear, the fierce spirit of a protector. Roared the leader, scrambling to his feet as he stumbled back towards his horse. He grabbed for his gun, but Carver was quicker. With a final burst of energy, he struck out again, pitchfork aimed true. The cold steel met flesh, and the outlaw fell back, pain eclipsing the bravado that had fueled him. Their confidence shattered, the brothers turned, retreating on their horses, leaving behind the wreckage of their bravado. The dust rose in clouds behind them, a trail laden with fear and humiliation. Old man Carver stood as the sun finally broke over the horizon, its light spilling golden across the land, illuminating his deep-set wrinkles and the fire still burning in his chest. The battle had been hard, each second stretching like eternity, but he had not faltered. He felt a warm satisfaction blossom within, mixed with the exhaustion that came from fighting for all he held dear. As the outlaws faded into the distance, Carver took a moment to process the whirlwind of events, the rush of battle, the rise of that raw instinct to defend what was his. He thought of the crops swaying in the breeze and the barn standing strong behind him. He remembered his ancestors, the long line of those who had come before him, who had also fought against the darkness with nothing but grit and determination. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a legacy, and this piece of land bore witness to everything he had endured. The sun climbed higher, casting warmth over him, and he felt a sense of peace wash over his spirit, a reminder that sometimes the fiercest battles are fought not with guns or knives, but with the unwavering courage of the heart. As Carver turned back toward his farmhouse, he knew the danger wasn't truly gone. The Grimm brothers would likely return, emboldened by their bruised pride, but he also knew he would be ready. For every inch of earth he tilled, every seed he planted, he did it with the knowledge that he was the keeper of this land, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. The dawn had been dark, but as light spilled across the fields, warmth returned to his spirit. He took in a deep breath, filling his lungs with the freedom that comes from standing one's ground. With determination, he strode confidently back toward the barn, heart steady, knowing that he had fought for his home and won. The outlaws might think him just an old man, but they had learned something that day. He was a force of nature, unyielding and fierce, a guardian of his dreams and the land he loved. And that fierce spirit would always rise, just like the dawn. It was just before dawn when the world held its breath, shrouded in a blanket of navy blue. The air was crisp, scented with damp earth and freshly turned soil, a reminder of all the hard work that had come before. But just outside the edges of that calm, something dark and dangerous stirred. 4 outlaws, their faces masked and their hearts cold, crested the hill like shadows come to life. They were looking for trouble, riding hard on horseback, spurring their steeds forward with each gallop, driven by greed and the thrill of chaos. The valley below was quiet, home to fields ripe with wheat, swaying gently in the window world that seemed untouched, innocent. But that wasn't the case. Not today. Old Man Carver woke up to the sound of hooves thundering over the ground outside his farmhouse, a familiar place filled with memories of laughter, toil, and resilience. His weathered hands gripped the edges of his bed, and he pulled himself up slowly, a bit of creaking wood echoing as he swung his legs over. Every ache in his bones told him he was getting older, yet his spirit burned bright, fueled by the knowledge of what he had built over the years. It was more than just land, it was home. Peering through the cracked window, he could see them now, those dark figures against the pale dawn. The Grimm brothers, notorious for their ruthless raids, their names spoken in hushed whispers around town. They meant trouble. Carver's heart raced, but fear would not take root in his chest. He had seen too much, fought too hard to protect what was his. He slipped on his boots, rough and sturdy, and grabbed the pitchfork that stood like a sentinel by the door. It wasn't just a tool for the harvest. In his hands, it became a symbol of his determination. He would stand his ground. He had made this life. He would not let it be taken from him. The outlaws rode closer, laughter spilling from their lips, taunting as they approached. The leader shouted, a hulking figure with a scar running across his rugged face. Their confidence swelled like the morning sun rising slowly in the sky, filled with the promise of warmth that belied the darkness gathering in their hearts. Carver stepped outside, the cool breeze sweeping past him, carrying with it the scent of the dew-kissed grass. He bellowed, feeling the fire rise in his chest, his voice steady despite the tumult that surrounded him. The Grimm brothers laughed, their pride tinged with the arrogance of those who believe they are untouchable. Carver could see the way they leaned into their saddles, confidence bloated like a balloon ready to pop. But he stood unmoving, rooted to his spot, a towering oak against the coming storm. Let's show him what happens when you don't listen, the leader sneered. Suddenly, all at once, the brothers urged their horses forward, the ground shaking beneath them as they charged toward him. Time slowed to a crawl, and Carver felt that electric pulse of adrenaline zipping through him. His heart thrummed loudly, a steady drumbeat calling him to action. Just as they were upon him, he thrust his pitchfork forward, its tines gleaming in the dim light. The lead horse reared, snorting in protest as Carver's strike found its mark. The outlaw tumbled sideways, hitting the ground, hard shock etched into his features as pain coursed through him. Carver had acted quickly, instinctively. His body knew what his mind had yet to completely process. He was protecting everything. The other outlaws hesitated, their arrogance wavering like a candle flickering in the wind, just for a moment. Their leader scrambled to regain his balance, fury igniting in his gaze. The man roared, rage fueling their reckless abandon. They charged again, but something had shifted. The fear was palpable now, whispering through the air like a ghost they couldn't shake off. Carver gripped the pitchfork tighter, his knuckles white with resolve. The second outlaw came at him, wild and reckless, but Carver was ready now. He sidestepped deftly, using the edge of his pitchfork to knock the gun clean out of the man's grip. It clattered to the ground, echoing through the tension-filled silence that enveloped them. Carver shouted, stepping forward, anchoring himself firmly onto the earth he cherished. Each word dripped with authority, a warrior defending his very soul. The outlaws paused, and in that brief moment of silence, he saw the flicker of doubt cross their faces. These were not invincible criminals. They were simply men, driven by their own fears, and right then they were realizing they had bitten off more than they could chew. But the leader, still seething, pulled out his revolver again, aiming it straight at Carver's chest. The young outlaw who had lost his gun crouched to retrieve it, his hand shaking as he grasped it tight. Time twisted again, the air thick with the promise of violence. Suddenly, the crisp sound of a gunshot rang out, splitting the dawn. Carver's instincts kicked in. He dove to the side in a split second, the bullet whizzing past him. He rolled back onto his feet, urgency propelling him forward. He could feel the heat pulsing through his veins. The sheer will to survive surged in him like a tidal wave. The brothers rushed at him again, desperation creeping into their movements. Beneath the bravado, he sensed their fear of failure, fear of the unknown. They were just men, flesh and blood, and against an older man fueled by the anger of 1,000 livelihoods, they faltered. Carver swung the pitchfork again, this time catching the leader's horse by the flank, making it buck. The outlaw was thrown violently, landing with a thud that echoed through the morning air. As he scrambled back to his feet, eyes wide with shock, Carver pressed his advantage. Carver bellowed, feeling invincible for the first time in years. But the grim brothers were driven by pride and rage. They lunged forward, the brother who had regained his footing moving in close, intent on grasping Carver's weapon. An electric tension ignited the air between them as they clashed, the sound of metal connecting with flesh resounding like thunder. Carver's movements were a decade's worth of farming, spills fluid, instinctive, formidable. Just as he ducked low to avoid a swinging fist, he blocked the brother's next move and thrust the pitchfork towards him. It met the outlaw's side, causing him to stumble back, pain coursing through his face. Another one of the brothers faltered then, finally catching the scent of defeat. The brothers exchanged frantic glances, confusion seeping into their bravado, their laughter replaced by uncertainty, mingling with disbelief. They had come expecting easy prey but were met with a wall of courage that left them rattled. The changing tides of battle carried the scent of fear. One outlaw turned, and then another, the grim realization dawning on their faces. But fear had set in like a parasite. It wrapped around their hearts and pulled them away. They huddled together, mounting their horses, eyes flitting back to the man who stood unwavering, his pitchfork glistening in the dawn light. As the horses galloped away, Carver held his ground, tension ebbing out of him as a profound silence fell over the land. The world resumed its breath, and he could feel the sun rising around him, igniting the skies in hues of gold and orange. He stood there for a moment longer, chest heaving with exertion, the adrenaline still humming in his veins. He had fought for his home, for the life he had built, the crops that swayed in the wind and the barn that housed memories of family. Old Man Carver was no longer just a farmer. Today, he had been a warrior. As the distant thundering of hooves faded into the morning, he turned back towards his farmhouse, heart pulsing with the wisdom of battles fought and won. He walked slowly, letting the earth beneath him anchor his spirit. Each step was a promise, a renewed commitment to protect what mattered most, no matter the odds. Inside the farmhouse, the light began to filter through the windows one ray at a time, illuminating his sacred space. And in that moment, Carver knew this wouldn't be the last time he'd face such darkness. He would remain vigilant, ready to defend his home against whatever challenges lay ahead. As the sun breached the horizon, its warmth seeped into his bones, washing over him, and he knew he would never back down. In the face of despair, he had discovered his own strength. The dawn had broken, revealing not just a new day but a new sense of purpose. The fire within him burned fiercely, illuminating the path ahead as he embraced the legacy he would continue to fight for, no matter the cost. At the crack of dawn, a low mist hung over the fields, weaving through the tall grasses like a ghost haunting the land. It was peaceful, with birds starting their morning songs, the world waking gently. But in the distance, 4 dark figures appeared, riding hard, the Grimm brothers. Laughter echoed around them, a cruel, sharp sound that sent chills through anyone who might hear. Old Man Carver was one of those who heard it, although he was no ordinary man. He had forged his life from this land, every crow's call and rustle of corn a part of him. He knew the rhythms of the earth, those quiet moments before something shifted, when danger felt tangible, like a heavy fog creeping at the edges. This morning, the weight of unease settled on his shoulders as he stood on his porch, eyes narrowed against the rising sun. The brothers were notorious, feared across the county for their ruthless raids, but they hadn't reckoned on him. They thought he was just an old farmer, a relic of a simpler time. What they didn't know was that beneath Carver's weathered exterior lay a spirit forged in fire. His hands gripped the rough wood of the railing, knuckles white against the grain. He could see them now, their faces twisted with greed and mischief, muscles tensed as they approached, ready to snatch away what they thought was easy prey. They had come like wolves, hungry for trouble, but Old Man Carver was no meek sheep. The leader hollered, a vicious glint in his eye. The sound sent a fresh rush of adrenaline coursing through Carver's veins. He knew the stakes. This wasn't just a fight for his crops, it was a fight for his very way of life. With a sudden sense of purpose, Carver stepped off the porch, a sturdy pitchfork gripped tightly in his hands, the one weapon that still stood in his corner. He shouted, voice steady, but every word crackled with tension. His resolve was a magnetic force. It could be felt in the air. The outlaws halted, surprise etched on their faces. They had not expected this farmer to stand his ground. They chuckled at the sight of him, thinking their bravado would intimidate him. But what they mistook for weakness was, in fact, a torrent of strength. With every minute that passed, Carver felt the weight of generations behind him, the legacy of those who had come before. The leader spat, urgency dripping from his voice. Without warning, they charged, a force of chaos unleashed. Carver felt his heart race but stood firm, his feet anchoring him to the earth. Time slowed as they rushed toward him, the hooves of the horses pounding like war drums in the distance. When they were close, Carver struck with surprising speed, thrusting his pitchfork forward with all his might. It connected with the nearest horse, causing it to rear back in panic. The outlaw screamed as he was thrown to the ground, the rising dust mixing with the morning mist to obscure the chaos that unfolded. For a moment, a hush fell over the battlefield. The outlaws were stunned, their laughter extinguished like a flame snuffed out in the wind. But they quickly regained their composure, anger sparking in their eyes. They had underestimated him, and that miscalculation ignited an even fiercer determination within Carver. He called out, voice booming now, swallowing the morning light whole. The brothers hesitated, a flicker of doubt creeping into their minds, but it was enough. Carver pressed the advantage. He moved like a shadow, weaving through the chaos, striking out with his pitchfork at every opportunity. The second outlaw lunged at him, rage driving his movements, but Carver was ready. He sidestepped, the pitchfork glinting as he redirected the blow meant for him. The outlaw stumbled, confusion flooding his features. In the moments that followed, Carver danced between the attackers, a whirlwind of resolve and power. Each movement was a mixture of instinct and years of hard labor, his body worn but alive with purpose. The adrenaline surged, pushing him forward, giving him strength. These men were not just outlaws. They were desperate, caught in the tide of their own arrogance. And here was Carver, a steadfast guardian of the land, fueled by something deeper than mere survival. One by one, the grim brothers battered against him, but they faltered, fear creeping into their hearts. Their unity dismantled, and soon whispers of uncertainty began to seep into their ranks. Carver pressed them, unleashing the seething energy that had long lingered beneath his skin. He warned, raising the pitchfork high. His voice no longer held the tremors of an old man. It commanded respect like thunder rolling across the barren plains. The leader, still spitting threats, scrambled to regain control, pulling out his revolver in a fit of rage. The sunlight glinted off its barrel, illuminating the darkness behind his eyes. Time stretched taut, each moment holding a weight that enveloped them all. But Carver was no stranger to such moments. He had stared life in the face countless times, and he had learned that courage springs not just from strength, but also from the unwillingness to bow to fear. As the outlaw squeezed the trigger, Carver ducked low, rolling swiftly to the side. The gunshot rang out, echoing through the stillness, sending birds scattering into the air. Heart racing, he sprang back to his feet, eyes locked on his attackers. Now was the moment to seize all that he had fought for. He lunged again, pitchfork aimed true, catching the lead outlaw off balance just as he prepared for another shot. The blade met skin, the impact a testament to the clash of wills. Carver could feel the shift in energy around him. The brothers, once a united front, were retreating, hesitation darkening their expressions. In the span of just a few moments, he watched as their bravado crumbled, their confidence shattering like glass. The leader roared, fury in his eyes as he clutched his wounded arm. And just like that, they turned their horses around, racing into the distance, leaving behind chaos and disbelief. The thundering hooves faded into the horizon, and the world returned to silence, save for Carver's heavy breathing. He stood tall, pitchfork at his side, rooted in the rich soil that told stories of courage. For a moment, he simply stood there, feeling the weight of victory wash over him, mixed with the exhaustion of the fight. The sun began to climb higher, pouring warmth over his shoulders like a comforting embrace, awakening the world from the nightmare. Carver turned back to his farmhouse, every step imbued with newfound purpose. The fields greeted him, the golden stalks of wheat dancing gently in the breeze, unscathed by the chaos that had just unfolded. He walked among them, heart swelling with pride. This was his sanctuary, his legacy. Inside the cozy space of his home, the memories rushed back to him like echoes in a vast canyon. The laughter of children, the warmth of dinners shared, the whispered dreams of generations past. It was the richness of life, stitched together with threads of hardship and resilience. Old Man Carver knew that the grim brothers would likely return, emboldened by their bruised pride, but he also knew he would be prepared. This wasn't just a fight for land. It was a testament to a spirit unbroken, a heart that refused to yield even in the face of insurmountable odds. With each passing day, he would rise again at dawn, facing whatever challenges lay ahead. He would till the earth, plant the seeds of hope, and nurture those dreams, fighting not just for himself but for all that he held dear. And as the sun finally broke through the horizon, casting a warm glow over the hills, Old Man Carver felt a surge of determination flow through him. His legacy would live on, a reminder that courage often comes wrapped in the most unexpected packages, sometimes an old farmer with a pitchfork. Each morning, as the sun crested the horizon, he would be ready, a guardian proud and fierce, unyielding in his dedication to the land and the life that he had built. He would not flinch, would not falter. This farm was more than ground. It was the very spirit of resilience, and he was prepared to fight for it until his last breath. In the face of danger, he would stand firm, a warrior forged in the heat of battle, rooted deep in his purpose. The sun had barely begun to rise when the silence of the dawn was shattered by the thunder of hoofbeats. A group of 4 dark figures charged down the gravel road, each silhouette growing larger as they drew nearer to the heart of the farm. Wild and unruly, the grim brothers rode with a fierceness that sent tremors through the earth, their intentions as sharp as the knives at their belts. They were notorious throughout the valley, feared for their ruthless land grabs and brazen theft. Old Man Carver peered out from the weathered porch of his farmhouse, the soft light of dawn painting his features with a mixture of bravery and weariness. His gnarled hands gripped the railing, knuckles white against the splintered wood, and for a moment, time stood still. The scent of dew-kissed grass floated through the air, and in the distance, a lone crow cawed, as if warning of the storm that was about to break. "Just old men and long shadows," he muttered to himself, his voice steady but low. With a deep breath, he collected himself. This wasn't the first time trouble had come knocking at his door, and with every fiber of his being, he knew he would stand his ground. The farmhouse behind him was not just a structure. It was a sanctuary filled with memories, laughter, and years of hard labor. This land had fed him, nurtured him, and he would die before letting anyone take it away. As the grim figures thundered closer, their malicious laughter echoed across the fields. Carver could feel the tension slithering through the air, wrapping around him like a snake ready to strike. He clutched his pitchfork, a relic of simpler times, the sharp tines catching the early sunlight, his only weapon but one he had wielded before. Called the leader, a burly figure with a scar that traced along his cheek like a battle wound, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Carver's heart quickened, but he stood firm, every inch of him refusing to budge. He bellowed, voice steady and booming. For a moment, surprise flickered across the brothers' faces. Surely they had expected him to tremble or beg for mercy. But something changed in the air. The laughter that once filled their hearts turned sour. "The old fool thinks he can stand against us," one of them whispered, but they were mistaken. What they saw as vulnerability was, in truth, the resolute spirit of a man who had fought for every inch of earth he stood upon. Just as the leader raised his hand to command the charge, a sudden silence fell upon the valley. The world felt poised, as though the very sky was holding its breath. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, the brothers surged forward, hooves pounding like war drums. Carver felt his heart race, but he didn't flinch. In those pivotal moments, he embodied every strength he had ever drawn from the land. The first outlaw collided with him, and Carver drove the pitchfork straight into the side of the charging horse. The animal whinnied in alarm, and the rider flew off, crashing into the earth with a thud that echoed across the fields. The scene unfolded like a thunderstorm rolling in, sudden and chaotic, leaving clouds of dust swirling through the air, sweat beginning to trickle down Carver's brow. The other brothers gasped. They had come expecting an easy target, and the sight of their fallen comrade sent a ripple of fear whispering among them. But even as doubt crept into their hearts, they charged him again, driven by a mix of rage and desperation. Carver's movements became fluid, each thrust of the pitchfork filled with purpose, as if the very act of defending his land breathed life into him. He saw their fear and struck again, dodging the next outlaw as he swung desperately for him. With a quick pivot and a lunge, Carver escaped the swing and caught the outlaw's arm with the prongs of the pitchfork, forcing him to stumble back. Carver shouted, every word echoing with the weight of generations who had fought to cultivate this land. But the brothers still hesitated, uncertainty dancing in their eyes. They had come to assert their dominance, only to find a man willing to fight to the death for what he loved. Their leader, half risen from the ground, drew a revolver, eyes blazing with fury. He roared, his voice a sharp command breaking through the battlefield's tension. The echoes rang in Carver's ears, but he was ready. He sidestepped, the adrenaline surging through him like a raging river, and the shot rang out like a clap of thunder, a bullet flying past him, narrowly missing its target. Carver called, voice steady and steadying, his challenge cutting through the air. Time seemed to elongate, the world around him fading away. In that instant, his focus sharpened. He was not just a farmer facing overwhelming odds. He was the spirit of the land itself. He lunged forward, crashing the pitchfork against the leader's arm, knocking the gun from his hand. It clattered to the ground, a metallic reminder of the stakes at play. The leader roared in frustration, scrambling to retrieve it but faltered, uncertainty washing over his face. Carver pressed his advantage, moving like a force of nature, the dawn light illuminating his resolve. He angled the pitchfork as another outlaw rushed him. Their confidence began to falter with every blow they absorbed. They were realizing they were not fighting a frail old man, but a steadfast defender. The fight raged on, every clash of metal and flesh a testament to courage and fear, and the brothers began to break apart, their unity dissolving under the weight of defeat. Carver held the line, his movements a mixture of calculated strikes and sheer determination. The leader bellowed, now panic evident in his voice. He scrambled to rise, clutching at his wounded arm. He turned to his brothers, desperation spilling into the air. But defeat was settling into the ground, and they were realizing they had miscalculated their chances. A glance exchanged between two of the brothers was all it took, a spark of doubt that ignited their instincts to flee. In an instant, they turned their horses and dashed away, leaving their leader behind. Realized he was all alone. He yelled, but his voice was nothing but an echo now. The once proud outlaws fled the scene, their bravado evaporating into the morning mist, leaving behind uncertainty and fear. Old Man Carver stood, hearts racing but filled with a strange kind of peace, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins as the sun began to rise higher, casting a warm golden hue over the battlefield. He had fought not just for land but for a life full of memories and meaning, for generations that had weathered storms far worse than this. He took a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of what had just transpired. The world around him was quiet now, except for the gentle rustle of the wheat swaying in the wind. He glanced back at the scars on the earth, reminders of the struggle, but they were also marks of triumph. Each one told a story of resilience and defiance. As Carver surveyed his surroundings, he felt a warm comfort wrap around him. The battle may have been fought, but it wouldn't be the last. He knew deep down that the grim brothers would return, emboldened by their wounded pride, but he would be ready. He was more than a simple farmer. He was the guardian of this land, a relentless spirit rooted deep in the soil. Turning back toward his farmhouse, he walked slowly, savoring the stillness of the morning, the familiar path beneath his feet speaking of years gone by. Each step he took was a promise to himself and to the generations that had come before. He would continue to nurture this land, cultivate its gifts, and protect it against any forces that threatened to destroy it. Inside the farmhouse, the memories flooded back in waves. Laughter gathered like warmth around the hearth, shadows of children playing entwined with the echoes of family gatherings. Each corner spoke of stories passed down, the sweat, the joy, the tears of those who had toiled before him. This land was more than a collection of fields. It was the heart of a legacy. As the sun climbed higher, pouring light over his world, Old Man Carver found solace in the knowledge that he had held firm against the storm. In that moment, he was ready to fight again if it meant protecting everything he cherished. With every dawn that broke, he would rise, pitchfork in hand, standing strong against any threat that dared approach. He would not flinch, not yield, for he knew that courage resides not in the absence of fear, but in the heart willing to stand and fight for what truly matters. And as the shadows of the night faded, Carver understood that the spirit of the land, the spirit of the farmer, would never back down. The grim brothers would soon learn that the heart of a true warrior knows no age, and no man could take away what was forged with blood, sweat, and an unbreakable will. Before the sun even began to peek over the horizon, a chill hung in the air, a ghostly fog creeping through the fields like a whispered promise of trouble. In the stillness of that early morning, an ominous sound broke the silence, the thunder of galloping hooves, sending ripples of unease across the vast farmland. 4 outlaws, wild and reckless, rode hard toward Old Man Carver's property, their laughter harsh and mocking, like a storm brewing just outside the peaceful world of the farm. From the porch of his battered farmhouse, Old Man Carver squinted into the gathering gloom, the familiar creak of aging wood beneath him sounding an alarm of its own. The figures hurtled toward him, dark shadows against the gray sky, but it wasn't the sight of them that sent fear coursing through his veins. It was the memory of what they represented, the grim brothers, known throughout the region for their ruthless raids, plundering innocent farmers and leaving chaos in their wake. "Not again," Carver muttered under his breath, gripping the railing as he felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He was no stranger to conflict, having faced off against rustlers and thieves before. Yet, as he saw those men approaching, an uneasy knot formed in his stomach. Carver's hands trembled, not from fear, but from an ember of defiance suddenly igniting within him. He was a guardian of this land, a farmer forged by sweat and hard labor. This home was not just a building, it was a legacy built through generations. He would not let these outlaws stake their claims on the life he cherished. He cast a quick glance around, seeking a weapon. His eyes landed on the old pitchfork leaning against the wall, its wooden handle rough but familiar. With determination, he stepped toward it, his fingers wrapping around the cool metal. This was a tool for harvesting, yes, but today, it would become a symbol of his resolve, a shield to protect what was rightfully his. As the outlaws closed in, the leader, the largest of the group, with a scar running jagged across his cheek, spurred his horse forward, a malicious grin plastered across his face. "Old man," he shouted, voice thick with bravado. Carver felt the rush of adrenaline spike through him. For that fleeting moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The outlaws paused, surprise flashing across their faces like a fading ember. They clearly underestimated him, thinking him just a feeble old farmer. But little did they know that old man Carver had the spirit of an ironclad beast. The leader commanded, and like a wolf pack unleashed, they charged forward, hooves pounding the earth with a ferocity that echoed through the valley. The air crackled with tension as Carver braced himself, his heart racing, but he held his ground. The first outlaw came at him fast, swinging a crude club. Carver sidestepped, muscles working like a well-oiled machine, and brought the pitchfork down, thrusting it forward with every ounce of strength he could muster. It connected with the horse's flank, and the beast let out a terrified whinny before rearing up. The rider lost his grip and tumbled to the ground, hitting the dirt with a bone-jarring thud. Shock rippled through the remaining outlaws. Carver had expected their fear. He had seen it before, but this time he felt the electric charge of empowerment coursing through him. He had defied them. Carver roared, a lion's growl escaping his throat. The brothers hesitated, eyes wide, seeking to retreat, but the leader urged them on, pride overriding any common sense. They struck again, desperation driving their movements. Carver fought back fiercely, swinging the pitchfork with a deftness that belied his age. Each thrust was calculated but born of instinct, a dance learned through years of hard work on the farm. Time slowed to a crawl as he blocked, dodged, and struck, a whirlwind amidst the chaos. The second outlaw lunged, but Carver dodged to the side, his movement surprisingly nimble, his heart a steady drumbeat in his chest. The outlaws, though larger and younger, began to falter, confusion settling in like a cold fog. Though they attacked with fury, they did not anticipate the tenacity of a man fighting for everything he cherished. Once more, Carver swung the pitchfork, catching the next outlaw by the arm, sending him tumbling into the dust. The speed at which he moved was surprising, not just to the attackers, but also to himself. He could feel it, the raw, wild energy swelling within him. The leader yelled, panic creeping into his voice. He fumbled with his revolver, clearly shaken by the unexpected resistance. That panic was palpable, electrifying the air as he pointed the gun at Carver, instinct screaming for him to pull the trigger. But before he could, Carver launched at him, adrenaline surging as the world around him transformed into a tumultuous blur. The pitchfork was an extension of his body, a weapon forged in the fire of his determination. A gunshot rang out, echoing like ripples on water, but Carver rolled away just in time, the bullet finding only air. He struck out instinctively, thrusting the pitchfork forward, catching the leader by the leg and forcing him to the ground in a gasp of pain. The remaining outlaws faltered, and with one glance exchanged between the brothers, the reality of their situation began to sink in like lead. They were overpowered by the sheer will of an old man they had underestimated. They were not just fighting him, they were fighting against every farmer who had ever fought for their land, their home, their livelihood. Carver's confidence snowballed. "You think you're tough?" His voice was a battle cry, a declaration of unity with every farmer who had ever persevered. It was more than just physical strength. It was resilience, a life lived on the edge, forged by loss and love. In that moment, the brothers realized they had misjudged their target, and there was no undoing the damage inflicted in their haste. One by one, they turned their horses and fled, fear seeping from their bones. They left their pride behind, their cries echoing into the distance. Old Man Carver stood in the aftermath, chest heaving, the sounds of battle fading into the silence of dawn. The fields around him were still, swaying gently in the breeze, as if celebrating his triumph. The sun began to crest the horizon, its rays slowly unfurling across the landscape, illuminating the chaos left in the wake of the confrontation. As he caught his breath, the weight of what had just occurred washed over him. He had faced predator and prey, and he had emerged victorious, not just for himself, but for every spirit that had fought for their land, for every farmer who had held fast against the tide of despair. Carver knew that this fight wouldn't be the last. The Grimm brothers would return. They wouldn't give up easily, and neither would he. Every corner of his farm was a testament to endurance, a reminder of the struggle that lay inherent in farming life. And yet, in that moment of solitude, he felt renewed strength flow through him, a promise that he would always defend that which was dear. As the sun warmed his skin, he made his way back to the farmhouse, where the familiar scent of earth mingled with nostalgia. Each step held purpose, echoed by memories of laughter and hard work. He thought of his family, those who had come before him and those who would follow. The land was a legacy, and he had defended it with every ounce of courage he could muster. He glanced back toward the field, surveying the aftermath, the remnants of the struggle marked in the rising dust, but also in the spirit of the land. He felt a deep connection, knowing that every blade of grass swaying in the gentle breeze held the stories of those who had toiled and lived there. "This is just the beginning," Carver whispered to himself, the fervor within still blazing. He would rise with the sun, ready to deal with whatever challenges lay ahead, fortified by the knowledge that the heart of a true farmer beats strongest in the face of adversity. And as the morning light glistened over the landscape, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, wrapping around him like a trusted friend. Carver would be vigilant, always ready to fight for what belonged to him, knowing that this land was a treasure worth defending. He stood tall, victorious, and emboldened, a steadfast guardian against the wild forces that would dare to disrupt the life he cherished. With the dawn behind him, he took one last look at the horizon, and in that moment, he knew that the spirit of the land and the fight within him would endure, unwavering and relentless, just like the rising sun. The darkness was only just beginning to fade when 4 riders came skimming over the horizon, dust swirling behind them like spirits of mischief. Their silhouettes were stark against the pale sky, each man a figure of malice, hardened by the cruel life they led, the Grimm brothers. In the small town below, whispers of their exploits had spread like wildfire tales of stolen livestock, families torn apart, and farms laid to waste. Old Man Carver woke early that day, as he always did, to the gentle rustle of wheat swaying in the soft breeze, but something was different. A tension hung in the air, sharp and electric. He stepped onto his creaky porch, the wood familiar beneath his worn boots. As he squinted into the morning mist, a sense of dread enveloped him. The unmistakable sound of galloping hooves grew louder, intertwining with the rhythmic beating of his heart. They were coming for him. Unease gnawed at his insides like a hungry dog. He had lived in that farmhouse longer than most townsfolk had been alive, pouring love and labor into the land. Memories of yesteryears flooded him, days spent in the fields, laughter shared with family, and the fierce storms faced with unbreakable resolve. This land was everything to him, a sacred ground that carried his legacy. He would not let it be taken away. With a deep breath, Carver reached for the pitchfork that stood vigil against the wall. It was just a simple tool, the kind for tending to livestock and tilling the earth, but today it would become his weapon. He felt its weight in his hands heavy, yet steadying, a symbol of everything he fought for. As the figures grew closer, their laughter cut through the tranquility like a jagged knife. The leader, a large man with a scar stretching across his cheek, shouted out, "Old Man." Carver's heart raced, but he stood tall, steadying himself against the porch railing like a tree rooted deep within the earth. "This land is mine," he yelled back, voice strong and unwavering. Surprise flickered in the eyes of the outlaws, and for a brief moment the tension hung between them, taut as a drawn bowstring. Carver could see the uncertainty glinting in their eyes, the fear masquerading as bravado. They were used to easy prey farmers who cowered under their threats. But he wasn't just any farmer. He was a man who had fought through storms and loss, and he wouldn't let fear dictate his fate. The leader roared, and like a snap of a whip, the brothers surged forward, galloping toward him with reckless abandon. The beat of hooves thundered, primal fear coursing through Carver's veins. Time slowed as the adrenaline surged. He felt alive, electric. The first outlaw swung a savage fist at him, but Carver sidestepped with surprising agility. He thrust the pitchfork forward, the sharp tines meeting the outlaw's horse with a sickening thud. The animal reared back, its rider flying off like a rag doll, hitting the ground with a violent crash. For a heartbeat, stunned silence hung in the air a moment when the world tipped off its axis. Then chaos erupted. The remaining brothers hesitated, eyes darting between their fallen comrade and Carver. They had anticipated an easy victory, but he was not the feeble old man they imagined. The strength within him radiated outward, igniting an ember of fear in their hearts. Carver shouted, his voice booming. The outlaws shifted, uncertainty creeping in. Cowardice wrapped its hands around their throats. Yet the leader, spurred by anger and pride, pressed forward. Carver moved, every swing of his pitchfork calculated and swift, each thrust a combination of years of toil and newfound fury. He swung left and right, blocking blows, striking true. The brothers swung their fists, but all they found was empty air as Carver danced around them. He remembered the countless hours of hard labor in the fields, the sun's blistering heat, the storms that threatened to wipe away everything he held dear. This was his land, his home, and he would fight to keep it. Carver yelled again, but the words fell on deaf ears. The leader, now desperate, pulled out a revolver, a symbol of cowardice masked as power. Carver had faced more formidable foes, but this man dared to wield a weapon against him. In that moment, everything shifted. With a surge of instinct, Carver lunged towards the outlaw, his pitchfork aiming for the gun. The discharge echoed through the morning air, the sound penetrating deeper than the bullet could scar. The shot grazed past him, just barely missing its mark. Time froze, electric tension coursing through the air as the brothers exchanged frantic glances, fear beginning to take root in their chests. Carver seized the moment. With all his might, he thrust the pitchfork forward, piercing through the dirt and hitting the ground beside the outlaw. The shock sent the man stumbling, the gun falling from his hands amidst clattering chaos. It felt surreal, a dance between predator and prey, only he was the one filled with righteous fire. The brothers saw it then. He was no ordinary farmer. He was a force of nature, fierce as the elements themselves. Panic crept into their eyes as they began to realize the weight of their error. This man would not bend or kneel. The leader shouted, desperation spilling from his voice. Driven by anger, they surged at him once more, but they had become disorganized, an unhinged pack of wolves without a sense of unity. Carver flowed through them like water, each movement purposeful, swift. He struck the sides of their horses, forcing them back, keeping the battle at bay. Every thrust became a statement, and every dynamic swing told a tale of defiance. But just as victory began to glow like a beacon on the horizon, a sharp pain shot through his side. He barely registered the third outlaw, lunging from behind, a knife aimed with precision. The blade found flesh, biting deep, and the world exploded into agony. Carver staggered, gasping, the cold sweat of pain flooding through him. Weakness tugged at the edges of his resolve, but he couldn't afford to falter. Not now. With a surge of adrenaline, he swung the pitchfork wildly, catching the outlaw in the torso. The man shrieked, the sound piercing the air as he stumbled backward, clutching his wound. In that moment of chaos, the other two brothers hesitated, glancing back at their injured comrade, uncertainty pulling them apart. This was their chance. Carver's heart thundered in his chest as he pressed forward, rallying the last of his strength. Each breath burned, each movement deepened the ache, but he pushed on like a raging storm, refusing to succumb to despair. But they were not finished yet. The leader, stricken by fear and fury, stepped back, a desperate plea clawing at his throat. "We'll be back. With that, the remaining outlaws turned and fled, horses galloping away. The ground shook beneath them, a cacophony of thundering hooves fading into the distance, leaving Carver alone, bloody and breathless. He stood amidst the remnants of the battle, the cool morning air now heavy with the scent of earth and sweat. In the back of his mind, the adrenaline began to ebb, replaced by the gnawing pain shooting through his side. He pressed a hand to the wound, warmth pooling beneath his fingers, far more than just the heat of his blood. But as he looked out over the fields, a flash of light caught his eye, glinting off something metallic in the rising sun. A shiver traveled down his spine, and he realized that while one battle may have ended, another was just over the horizon. He turned sharply, and a wave of dread washed over him. In the distance, a new set of riders appeared, emerging from the veil of dawn, a second wave closing in. Not again, he whispered to himself, fear thrusting deep into his gut. Carver's heart raced as he scanned the fields for a way to defend his home. The fight had only just begun. The question loomed large. Would he be able to stand against this new attack? And as the figures drew closer, even he felt the weight of uncertainty begin to press down on him, a chilling reminder that sometimes, in the battle for survival, courage alone might not be enough.